They rush out and they buy the first van they see offline because they got a good deal on it, and they don't realize that the ramp's too small, and then most wheelchairs don't fit on the ramp. So many people want to like jump in and they overlook tiny little details that really aren't little details. Like, for example, I've seen so many people, they rush out before they talk to me or one of the other, people that give advice in the industry, and they rush out and they buy the first van they see offline because they got a good deal on it, and they don't realize that the ramp's too small, and then most wheelchairs don't fit on the ramp. And then they're like, oh my God, I spent all the money that I had on this wheelchair, and now wheelchairs don't even fit on the ramp. So just like little things, people don't think about that, but it's a big factor. So now you're not able to take all the wheelchairs when transporting clients. So people don't realize that. So just little stuff like that.
That was a great nugget right there.
Yeah, it is. It's the little stuff. People don't, it's so overlooked, but it's so important. And there's so many tiny little details like that. And I've come to realize how many of them there are, because people reach out to me and they're like, I did this. How do I fix it? And I was like, it would be so much better just to get advice before you jump into all this. It'll save you time, money, headache, everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're also bite-sized too, which makes it great for the TikToks that you do.
Yeah.
Marina, you have a really cool trajectory in the NEMT space because you started out really early in your career with NEMT. So backstory for everyone, Marina started her business at the age of 22, and it was a really inspiring why she did it. Marina, you want to give your quick backstory?
Yeah, absolutely. So I originally went to college, and I have a degree in health administration, health management. And while I was getting my degree, my grandma lived 3 hours away. She was going to various appointments for cancer treatment, and she was utilizing non-emergency transportation. Well, like many other people, we were constantly getting calls from her saying, they're not picking me up. They've showed up late. I don't feel comfortable getting in this car with this person. And at that time, we didn't really understand. We're like, they're here to pick you up. Why are you not going with them? Or we didn't understand, why are they late, or why are they not showing up? So at that time, myself and my mom said, well, let's just go ahead and pay for the transportation, make sure she gets there, because we weren't always able to take her to her appointments when she lived so far away. And I just started looking into it. I was working at a doctor's office at the time. And I was like, who else is using transportation? Why is this happening? And I just realized that there's a huge demand here. And it wasn't long after that I graduated college, I got a couple other jobs, and I was looking into this. It's a long process. And at that time, I was very young and I was very poor. So to get business funding for a new business like that, especially with how expensive non-emergency transport can be to start up, it was just such a long process. But that's really eventually what led me to start my business.
Okay. I won't ask how long it's been, so you won't have people doing math here.
Yeah, no, it's been just about 5 years now. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you're in Florida. Which part?
I am in West Central Florida. So I'm about an hour north of Tampa and an hour west of Orlando.
Okay. So one of the cool things I love about your TikTok videos is that you often do these pieces where it's like, hey, here's me, with palm trees and a beach setting, and I get to live this cool life because I did all the hard work. And then you actually show, vehicles, strapping in wheelchairs, getting your, employees in line, doing all the hard work, right? It's you show people the dream, but you're also very real about what it takes to get that kind of life. But before getting into your TikTok and building the NEMT network, can you talk to us about when you started your business? You went through a number of struggles, which is why you have the experience to put out all your educational content that you do now. But what were some of the key struggles you overcame, I guess, in the past 5 years to building up your fleet to the size it is now and to the operational efficiency that you have?
Yeah. I would say better question is what struggle didn't I go through? Especially when I started, it was peak COVID too. So starting a business alone is so difficult, and there's so many challenges that you have to overcome, but especially through COVID. I mean, it was a new world, not just for non-emergency transportation, but for everybody, and especially people in healthcare. So that was a challenge in its own on top of starting a new business. So, I mean, just getting funding was a huge challenge for me, especially being so young. That was a process in its own, but eventually, once you figure out that there really are so many different options out there to help fund new businesses, when you know where to look, then it really becomes much easier. And then I think the little things were also one of the most difficult. Whenever I first started, I was like, oh, it'll be easy. I'll hire some employees, this and that. But hiring staff was also, and still continues to be, the most difficult part of my business, for sure, is hiring staff.
Do you have this like always on mindset in terms of hiring? Like, are you always in hiring mode?
Yeah. And I think no matter who you talk to or what industry they're in, they're always hiring. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So over the past 5 years, I guess like that's the one sort of biggest overarching theme is like continually finding the right people and keeping the right people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the most difficult part.
What do you think are like the best tactics you've learned in doing that?
I have a fantastic group of people right now. Everyone has been with me at least 2 years, and I think that's very difficult to find. And what I have found that works best for me with the group of people I have right now is find people who are hungry and who have the same, I'm not going to say that they're always going to have the same dream as you, because they don't. Nobody's ever going to care about your business the way that you do, but they have the same compassion and they have the same drive, and you treat your people well and you pay them well. I pay my employees more than other companies in the area. They're going to stay with you. I mean, my employees, they don't have to do a lot of the things that they do for me, but I know that they do it because they like working for me, they respect me, and they truly have the same goal in mind, and they really have the compassion. They have more compassion than I could have ever asked for them to have. I mean, there's been instances where when we do discharges out of hospitals and we take people home, you don't always know what you're walking into. You never know what someone's living situation is, and that's been a very difficult thing for me. But there has been instances where we walked into home and seen less than desirable conditions, and they've called me and explained it to me if I wasn't there. And there was one instance in particular, they called me and explained the situation. I went over there and I told them, hey, you guys can take off. I'm going to help her. This is going beyond the scope of our job, but I just did not feel comfortable leaving her in that situation. I said, hey, I'm going to help her clean up the home to make sure that she can be here. And it was the end of the day. They all could have went home, but they said, no, you don't have to do this, and we don't either, but we're not leaving you to do this on your own. And they stayed and helped me for like an hour. They didn't have to do that, but they did. So awesome. finding people like that, treating them well, makes them stay, and paying them more too. So that helps.
And it's a reflection on your business when you go and try to win over facilities and private pay and market your business. And a good chunk of your business, Marina, is private pay. Can you tell us about that, like how you developed that?
Yes. So it really was developed by kind of what you just said, is going and being different than everybody else. And our reputation is the reason that I have the private pay, and I have the relationship with all the facilities in town, and I have the relationship with all of my hospitals. It's because of not just myself. And I'm also, especially in the beginning, I was out there, I was doing trips, I was in and out of the hospitals, I was talking to people when I was going in and out of the facilities. Hey, who handles your transportation? What problems are you having? How can I help you solve these problems? A lot of people don't have that relationship. They just show up, pick up their person, and leave, and they don't build that relationship with them. And they also, I guess, don't go out of their way to solve any other problems. My company, we get calls all day long from our facilities saying, hey, this company didn't show up to pick up this person, or they're going to be 45 minutes late. Can you come get this person? And we solve their problems. So you need to talk to your facilities, figure out what issues they're having, and solve those problems for them. And they're going to call you for everything. People don't realize that in your facilities, you generally have 3 departments. So you have admissions department, who is going to admit people from hospitals or from home into the facility, so you can get people from admissions. Then they have case management, who is generally going to arrange the discharge. Sometimes they arrange the appointments while they're there. And then most of the time they have a transportation coordinator or someone who handles the actual patient's appointments while they're at the facility. So you should be getting calls from all 3 of those departments in one facility. And I do that because I talk to each of those key staff members and figure out what problems they're having and how can I help. So I think that's really what set us apart, is having that relationship and building rapport with each of those key employees, where most people just go towards the brokers and they don't think anything more of it.
Yeah. So on that note, like, private pay, can you give us sort of like a picture of like your business? Like, you've got a fleet size of how many vehicles at this point?
We have 6.
You have 6 vehicles. You have a breakdown of like certain part of your business is private pay, certain part is brokers, and there's diversity among those two, right?
Yes.
Okay. Like you work with multiple different brokers and like, of course, various private pay facilities.
Yes. Yes. So I know most people just say facilities and they include their hospitals and their rehab centers and those, but I kind of separate them because it's a different type of work. Like most of our hospital work is simply discharges, so they're all one-way trips. So I am probably at this point in time, 35 to 40% is same day reservations from my hospitals. So it is all discharges strictly from my hospitals. Another 30 something percent right now is from my facilities. So those are discharges, admissions, and same appointments. So clients going to appointments. And then, gosh, probably another 30% is private pay. So those are people that live at home, live in independent living facilities, live in senior apartments, and they're going to appointments. Some of them aren't going to appointments. They're going to grocery stores and they're going out to eat with their family and, doing other social activities. Another 30% is probably private pay, where they're actually paying me on the date of service with cash, check, or credit card. And then probably the other 10% is broker work.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in terms of like type of transport, like ambulatory, wheelchair, stretcher, is there like, any one that you focus on more?
Right now, we are heavily focusing on stretcher. Obviously, we do lots of wheelchair. My ambulatory is really pretty minimal. I have one facility, which is actually a high-end nursing home. They have a bus, but they can only take so many residents at a time. So I take any of their overflow. They call me every week. They set up appointments for those residents, but they also pay me basically wheelchair rates for their ambulatory. But otherwise, I generally don't spend a lot of resources on ambulatory. I find that most of the time those transports, they don't want to spend the money, which we would have to charge in order to do that transport, just because Uber and Lyft and taxi services have really, made it so affordable for them that if they don't have to, I don't blame them. I probably wouldn't pay those prices either. But some people are willing to, especially, if they've had experiences in like taxi companies or Uber. I know not everybody has had good experiences, especially older women. They don't generally feel comfortable getting in cars with random people that they don't know. They feel more comfortable when a non-emergency company shows up to get them that has a uniform on and has a labeled vehicle. So I understand that sort of thing, but really my ambulatory is pretty minimal.
Okay. So given everything, right? Like you have your breakdown of private versus brokers and how they pay you. You've got a focus on stretcher and then wheelchair, like 6 vehicles. Like if you like, are you in a position where like, hey, this is exactly how I want my business to look? Or do you feel like I want to lean into this thing more, or like change the makeup of my business a certain way?
I am actually dealing with that right now. I am struggling with that. I'm going to be honest. Part of me likes the dynamic of my business right now. I like not putting all of my eggs in one basket. I like being diversified. Another part of me really wants to focus more on facilities and growing with hospitals. There are a couple other companies that are in the county just north of me, and they strictly have vehicles waiting on discharges from hospitals all day long. And part of me really loves that dynamic and not worrying about all of the appointments all day long. So I don't know. I'm actually in limbo right now because part of me really wants to shift that way. And part of me is very happy with how things are going at the moment. So I have been thinking about that a lot lately. I don't have an answer on exactly what I want to do yet.
So let's throw the NEMT network part of that into the mix. You're actively managing a 6-vehicle NEMT business.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, when did you start NEMT Network?
Probably about a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago, something like that. And I was overwhelmed with how many people wanted to start a company. They weren't even sure where to start. And at that point, I realized I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have the time because I'm still actively running my company. I don't have the time to answer all of these emails and talk to people on the phone because they really do have good intentions when they're reaching out. They want all of their questions answered. But as a person trying to do this all on my own, I was like, I don't have the time to do all of this. So that's really what started it, is I realized it's a great opportunity to educate people about how to get into the industry. But like you said earlier, I really focus on the reality of getting into the business because I think there are so many people who, not just with NEMT, but any business, you see the life on TikTok and you're like, oh, they're doing all these cool things and they have all these cool things. And, it's sunshine and palm trees all the time. I can do that too. But you never see what happened that led up to that. So I like bringing that approach into it is, yeah, all these people have these things, but they didn't get it overnight. Because I realized a lot of people try to jump into the industry and they get frustrated right away is, I'm not getting the work, or this is so much work, and they're overwhelmed, but they don't realize we all dealt with that too. We just didn't show you. So I like being the person that shows you it's not easy, but it is so, so worth it.
So it's about a year ago, you decide like, hey, I'm getting all this influx of questions. Like, I need to answer these questions in a scalable way.
Yeah.
You start putting out TikToks. TikTok is your main platform. You also do Instagram. Yeah. And you put in like all these like really important lessons, especially for people who are starting their NEMT businesses, in like really bite-sized format and these like good nuggets. And you and I were talking about this before. Like, can you give us some of like the handful of things that like people who are starting out like just wouldn't have thought of, but they need to hear it?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a couple things that stand out to me because people have reached out to me, and I guess I don't think about it as being something super important, I guess, just because you do it every day, or you're like, I've been doing this for so long, you don't realize that, wow, that is something very important that people need to know in the beginning. One of them being, like I was telling you earlier, is I see a lot of people, or I get a ton of emails where people want to get into the business, they see a great deal on a van, they go out and buy it, and then they start transporting clients, and they don't realize that not every van you see on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist is built the same. They all have different ramp sizes. And when you show up to pick up people, not all the wheelchairs fit in the vans. So I have a lot of people that went and spend, I've had people spend like upwards of $20,000, and they're like, these wheelchairs aren't fitting in this van. Yeah, because it's not meant for commercial use. A lot of these vans that you see on Facebook Marketplace and whatnot is, from your next door neighbor that had to transport her husband for a couple months or whatever. And then they end up passing away and they're just ready to get rid of the van, but it was used for everyday use, not for commercial use. So not all ramps are bariatric size and a lot of wheelchairs don't fit in them. So that can be a very expensive mistake. And it's something so little, but it really is a big mistake, especially when you're spending that much money. So that's a huge one.
Yeah.
And then I would have to say the other one is the amount of time and I guess the amount of time that you're going to spend on your business. There was a gentleman that reached out to me a while ago, 6 months ago or something, and he said he wanted to get into the business. You know, he had industry experience, I guess, and he was prepared. He was asking me if, you know, it was reasonable to spend 35 to 40 hours a week on the business. That is not reasonable. I think that goes back to what people see online is they think, oh, well, they do it, you know, I can do it myself. And it's, you know, you're going to work an 8 to 5 or whatever. And that's not the case. I mean, when I first started, I was working 90, 100, 120 hours a week all the time. Now a good week's like 60 to 70 hours a week. So like you're still working all the time. So I think that's a big thing. This is not a 9 to 5. This is not a 40-hour work week. You're transporting patients all the time. And even when you're done doing that, there is still more work to be done. So that's something else that people don't realize is it's a lot of work. It's very time consuming. I miss out on lots of family events and social events, and my personal life has really slimmed down.
So we were talking the other week about how like a lot of the stuff you put out is the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people need to hear. Like the catch-22 sort of is that people need to hear this stuff, but oftentimes they're finding out about NEMT Network and they're seeing this stuff after they need to hear it. Like, I mean, how do you try to solve for, you know, getting ahead of that for people?
I am trying to, I guess, really build my online platforms more and kind of give people the reality of starting and running a business. And I know I definitely need to spend a little bit more time doing all of those things, but really just opening up all of my platforms for people to reach out and send emails and, you know, send us an instant message or a DM and ask those questions before you go and spend all of this money. And it really bothers me when I see people in their 40s, late 50s, and they're wanting to spend like their retirement fund to get into the business. But then they're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that, you know, I'm going to have to put 20% down on my insurance policy and it's, you know, $15,000 to $20,000 a year per vehicle. And they're like going to blow their whole savings and they're not prepared to do this. So that part really scares me for people is I want them to realize these are the realities of running not just an NEMT business, but any business. And I want to educate them before they get way in over their head. It not only affects them and their financials, but at the end of the day, it also ends up affecting our patients. And if we're providing poor services to them, then it's causing larger issues for really the whole industry. And it puts a bad name on the whole industry. I think a lot of the industry does have a bad name. So the more that we can educate people and provide them resources, I think the better that it will get. But there really is minimal resources. So the more that people have easily accessible videos and content, the more informed they'll be before they make such a huge decision.
In 5 years from now, where do you think you would want your transport business to be in terms of like what types of transports you're focusing more on, like your fleet size, like are you good where you are, you want to grow it, and NEMT Network, like is that something that you want to lean more of your time into doing? Because I know like your transport business takes up like most of your time.
It does, yes. I have made so much progress, I guess, over the past 5 years, especially the past really year to 2 years. Really in the past year, I've started having more of a personal life again. So in the next 5 years, I definitely want to grow the company to a point where I have more of a right-hand man that I can kind of count on. I don't think that people realize how much as the owner you do just to get your business off the ground, between everything that you handle on the day-to-day operations, but also behind closed doors. So I really want to focus more on, at this point in time, me growing the company, that if I decided to step away for a couple days, it runs very smoothly without me, which it is right now. But I would really like to grow to a point where I have more freedom. And then I definitely want to focus more on I think my hospitals and my facilities. That's really going to be where I think, to have a company that stays in business for a long period of time, I think that's where you're really going to find it. I feel like the industry continues to change so much, especially with the brokers and all of the new things that are being put in place, how things are evolving. I really feel like facilities and hospitals will help the longevity of a company. So I think that's the direction that we're really leaning in.
Okay. And then like on the NEMT network side, like you've blown up on TikTok, you do your coaching, like, is that something that you want to like put more time and focus into, like as your NEMT business, like, you know, can handle itself more?
For sure. That's kind of why I want to have a little bit more freedom with my transportation business, is so I'm able to help people. Because there was some study done, I don't remember who put it out, but it's like by 2028, the NEMT industry is expected to grow like 30% or something in the next 4 years, which is crazy to think about. So I really feel like there's going to be a lot more people entering the industry, and I want to have more time to focus on that, because at this point in time, you know, I only offer very little, and I know I could do so much better on my TikTok and my Instagram, but I simply don't have the time to put a ton of resources into it. And I know that if I want to be able to give more to the NEMT network, I want to be able to give that personalized service. I don't want to say, you know, hey, I can help you, and then not truly be there for anyone that is asking me to assist them with their business. I want to be 100% accessible. And I know right now I can't give a ton of people 100%. So I keep what I do on the NEMT network side pretty limited, but I definitely want to be able to expand that as I have more freedom with my transport company.
You're still putting in like what, like you said, like 70-ish hours a week, like on average?
On average, I was short staffed yesterday, so I worked about 5:30 and I got home about 9 o'clock last night. So
Damn.
yeah. So that's like what, 15 hours or whatever. And then, yeah, so I do most of my billing on Saturdays.
You all, you're billing yourself, like you don't have anyone else do that?
No. I feel
Okay.
like my finances is one thing that I want to keep to myself. I know a lot of people have other people do it, but I really don't spend that much time doing it, because most of my stuff's facilities. So really, I just print an invoice at the end of the month and email it to everybody. So I really don't spend that much time doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I probably work like 70 to 80 hours a week most of the time.
I mean, you don't usually drive yourself, right? So the work you're doing is everything else.
Everything else. Yesterday, I was in a van because I was short staffed yesterday.
Okay.
So that's why I had such a super long day yesterday. But I do everything else. I try to stay very personal with my facilities and my hospitals, and I do a lot of networking and talking to them. Or sometimes if my employees has something going on, I generally don't drive, but I'll ride shotgun with one of my drivers, and I'll do stretchers with them for a little while if they need help. But otherwise, I do everything else. I don't much though. I have 2 dispatchers.
Okay. So like a lot of your time is like you're going to all of your hospital clients and just like maintaining relationships.
Yeah. And trying to build more. Yeah. That's a lot of that. I also generally get stuck with taking vehicles for maintenance and handling those sorts of things. Yeah. No. It's a lot. It's a lot more than people originally realize.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see why TikTok has to take a backseat.
Yeah, it definitely has taken a backseat. I want to put more time into it, but it's extremely time consuming. Not the TikTok part, but once people start reaching out, they reach out all the time and they want to book calls all the time, and they don't realize like I also run a business too, which I know like some of the others, they're not driving all the time or they're not actively out as much as I am, but I really don't. Where this is my priority, I would love to make that my priority. Trust me, I would love to be
Yeah.
like consultant all the time, but I really do enjoy I enjoy my business. So
Any final thoughts?
yeah, final thoughts would definitely be it is so possible, but it's not easy. And I think doing the research and understanding the fundamentals is so essential. Too many people want to jump in too quick and not do the research. It really is. There's so much more. There's so many moving parts. I guess that's the best way to explain the business is there are so many moving parts that you don't even know exist because there's so much that goes into the business and the resources are so limited. So, I mean, just take advantage of the people who are willing to offer help and the resources that they have available. It'll really help you save time, money, effort, headache, tears, literal blood, sweat. Like take advantage of those opportunities and the resources available because I wish I had them 5 years ago. Like the amount of headache I could have saved myself would have been tremendous to have all that time. So now there are people out here, willing to help. And that is so nice because it really is, a business that people are getting into. And there's not a lot. Even still looking with, I know myself and several others are finally offering to help, but really there's still not a ton of people in the industry willing to help. A lot of people join the Facebook groups and like everyone acts like it's, secret information that they can't share, but I think there's plenty of business to go around for everybody.
I want to add on to that. So like, when we started Bambi 1.5 to 2 years ago, like you didn't have folks out there who were like, hey, I'm an NEMT coach. I've been through the trials and tribulations. Like, let me mentor you. Like there was very little of that.
Very
Like,
new. It's very new. There was none of that when I started. Nothing.
yeah. Yeah. And like you started 5 years, even 1.5 years ago, like it just wasn't there. Like I would encourage anyone viewing this, like it is so worth the time and investment to get the advice of people like Marina who've been through the trials and tribulations in so many ways and just leapfrog ahead. Like don't just, run into those pitfalls. Like there are so many things that you have not thought of that people have been through before you and they're willing to help. Like it's almost foolish to not take advantage of that. So you can find Marina's content on TikTok at NEMT Network. Her website is also there, NEMT Network. She's super accessible. Marina, thanks so much for spending this time. This has been really insightful, as all your content usually is, and really fun. Thanks so much.
Run, Bambi, run.
Awesome.